Good day, folks. In this lesson, part one of tile maps, we're going to be creating a tile map and getting to know sort of the differences between tile maps and game objects and sprites and things like that. First of all, some housekeeping. Let's go ahead and grab this file here. Click on Download Image. That's going to be the sprite that we're going to import to use as a tile. Okay. So I'm just going to maximize Unity here a second. Okay, so basically, so far we've had a situation where we've imported sprites before and we've associated them with game objects. Well, for a map, it doesn't make sense to have like 50 million game objects. We want to basically draw our sort of map and kind of have that be sort of a separate beast than sort of like our hierarchy of things we want to manipulate and code and things like that. So what we're going to do for this one is we're going to be creating a tile map, as a parent of a bunch of kind of objects you're not really going to manipulate. Okay. So anyways. Enough talking about that. Let's get to work. So let's go ahead and just do a right click, and we're going to say 2D object, and we're going to make a tile map. Okay, and we're just going to call this, just keep it as the default things, grid and tile map. All right, and when we click on grid, let's go here to scene. When we click on grid, you see now we've got a grid, and this is going to be sort of like how we're going to be sort of thinking of how our tile maps are going to work. So these units are sort of uniform because we're just going to be sort of like placing, sort of like painting individual sort of tiles into this. So let's start constructing some tiles. Okay, and there's some interesting things here as far as these grid sizes. We have them by they're 1 unit by 1 unit. And this is going to be, sort of come into play when it comes to, like how we traverse, like the map and how we move around. So, anyways, we're going to go ahead to our art assets, and we're going to go ahead and make a new folder, and we're going to call this just tiles. So let's go ahead. If we say create folder, we're going to call this tiles. So we're going to want to make that in our art folder. Okay, so right now the components we're going to have there will be just animation, sprites, and tiles. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead into the folder, and we're going to go ahead and say create, and then we're going to say tile. Okay. That's going to ask us where we want to save that. We're just going to call this first tile. And I just have that camel case, capital F, capital T. Okay. We're going to save this into our tiles folder we just created. Okay. All right, so now we start off, and there's really not much associated with this at this point. It's just saying what sprite should be used, color, and collider type. We now are going to associate it with the image that we downloaded. That's the sprite we're going to use. So let's go ahead and go into our sprites folder, and then go into, I think, environment. And then let's go ahead and do a right click, and we're going to say import new asset. And let's go to, for me, it's my downloads folder as far as that tile.png. You can see Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the new D&D supplement just came out when I recorded this. We go ahead here and we go to tile. That PNG that we downloaded from Schoology, we click on import. Okay, so now we have a tile here that we imported that we're going to be using for our, we imported a PNG or an image that we're going to associate with our tile. So let's go back to our tiles folder, and let's go to first tile, and then go ahead and we're going to set this as the sprite we want it to be associated with. So let's go to sprite. And I sort of resized my window. Yours might be kind of small. I'm just going to make that pretty big, and then there's that tile that we want to associate with it. So let's click on that. And now we have a tile associated with that. So, cool. Okay, well, we've got a tile. How do we start painting? So just as if, if you're thinking of if you were drawing a portrait, let's say I'm a fancy schmancy artist and I want to, do a portrait, Mona Lisa style, I'm gonna need a palette, okay? So I'm gonna need sort of a set of things that I'm gonna use kind of as my paint. So when I paint, I have sort of ready sources of like pre-existing things. So we need to go ahead and we're going to be creating a tile palette, okay? So if we go here to Window, 2D, Tile Palette, all right? We're going to be given this sort of palette here. So we're going to actually create a new palette. Let's just call this Game Palette. Click on Create. Keep all of these as default, okay? And then let's just save this in the sort of in the same location as far as the tile folder, okay? So, yeah, there we go. We've got the tiles folder right there. Good, good, good. Okay, good. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this, this window here and we're going to drag this tile, that palette. We're going to create the tile, add the tile that we created and to our palette. So we go ahead here, we drag it. Okay. So we've got this as a palette. Let's select this is sort of like, think of this as like it's a red. We've got a red in our palette. And if let's go to our paintbrush, pick this guy, and then we're going to start drawing. Now we notice that's not totally, I'm just clicking around. There's really no specific thing you have to do here. Now you notice it does not fill the grid that we have created. Now this is because the image that we had imported needs to be given specific sort of like instructions on how it should be handled. So like there's a mismatch between the size of our grid and the size of like the image that's being drawn. So we're going to go ahead to the hierarchy. We're going to start looking at the image that we imported. So let's go to Sprites, and then Environment, and let's go back to this tile image that we imported. Okay, so one thing is, let's go ahead and let's see how my cursor sort of changed, how I can sort of like, I've got kind of like a way to resize this bottom window. I'm going to go ahead and just drag this up. There we go. So now this gives us kind of a preview of what the image looks like. It also, importantly, gives us about the dimensions of this image. So it's 64 by 64. And if we look at our import settings, we're going to say here that this should be basically 100 by 100. We're assuming these sort of are uniform squares. Okay, well, you're going to have a problem here. 64 by 64, 100 by 100, we're assuming that you have 100 pixels worth of stuff. Well, that ain't it, Chief. So we're going to go ahead, let's go ahead and set this to 64. Click on Apply, and just like magic, our import settings have been adjusted so that now when we say like 1 unit, it's going to fill this whole unit. It's going to sort of like stretch things and give you a good time, okay? In the next lesson, we're going to be going and importing a bunch of tiles at once. For now, this is a good place to pause. Let's just go ahead, just take a picture or a screenshot of like kind of like what you sort of drew and making sure that your tiles are drawn correctly. So let's pause here. Wish you the best of luck. Great stuff.